Welcome to the SDI Open Water Scuba Diver course. Together, we'll take things step by step, starting from the basics of scuba diving, covering not only essential theory, but also hands-on training in open water or a pool, so you can enjoy diving safely and with confidence. You might feel a little nervous at first, but you'll soon find this to be a much more fun and rewarding experience than you imagined. Welcome to the world of diving. You are now taking the very first step into a truly special experience. From now on, you will explore beautiful waters both in your own country and abroad, and see the wonders of the underwater world with your own eyes. Observing marine life up close and floating freely in the water will be a completely new world unlike anything you've experienced before. This SDI Open Water Diver course will be the starting point of your diving journey. About 75% of the Earth's surface is covered by water. This means that if we only live our lives on land, we're actually missing out on experiencing most of our planet. The ocean is a vast and deep world, filled with endless opportunities for exploration. Diving is the key that opens the door to that world. Through this course, you'll encounter marine life and environments you've never experienced before, and gain a whole new perspective on our planet. The ocean is home to far more diverse life than the land, and diving allows us to see it, feel it, and experience it for ourselves. Now, you will begin learning the fundamental skills and knowledge of scuba diving. At first, the equipment may feel unfamiliar, and your movements may feel awkward. But this is a sport that anyone can learn and enjoy, regardless of age or gender. Diving is a safe recreational activity, but it requires accurate skills and solid knowledge. Good physical health and swimming ability are important. And above all, a positive mindset and focus are essential. As you gradually gain experience, your skills will naturally improve, and you'll start to feel more and more comfortable in the water. Even after you complete this open water diver course, the world of diving has no end. You can go on to explore specialty courses such as underwater photography, night diving, wreck diving, and cave diving, as well as advanced training like nitrox diving, rebreather diving, and ice diving. In other words, diving is not just a single activity. It is a world where you can continuously create new challenges and learning experiences for yourself. Your first step begins now, and through this course, you will open the door to that vast world. Now, let's begin the first chapter of your diving journey, diving and the underwater environment. In this chapter, we will cover 4 main topics. 1. The history of diving. 2. The underwater environment. 3. Oceanography. 4. Marine life. At the end, we'll go through a short review exercise to help you check and reinforce what you've learned. Diving has fascinated people for centuries. In ancient Rome, it's said that during wartime, divers would use a barrel-like device lowered into the water to breathe while carrying out missions to attack or defend against the enemy. This device was called a diving bell. Early diving equipment, however, was very different from what we have today. It was extremely large and heavy, and divers had to receive air through a hose connected to the surface. Naturally, this placed many limits on movement, and adjusting depth was no easy task. Looking back now, it was a truly primitive method, but it was these early attempts that paved the way for the modern scuba gear we use today. Modern scuba equipment first appeared in 1943 when French ocean explorer Jacques-Yves Cousteau and engineer Émile Gagnon developed the aqualung. The aqualung used a cylinder filled with compressed air and a twin hose system, allowing divers to breathe freely underwater. Unlike earlier equipment, it no longer required an air supply from the surface, which meant divers could move independently and greatly expand their range of exploration. Thanks to this invention, diving evolved beyond military and industrial purposes and became an activity that the general public could enjoy for sport and recreation. By the 1950s, recreational scuba diving began to take off. However, at the time, people didn't fully understand the effects of the underwater environment on the human body, and accidents during dives were not uncommon. In 1957, the U.S. Navy developed the dive table, a tool that calculated how long a diver needed to make decompression stops after a dive, based on depth and bottom time. This was a major step forward in preventing pressure-related injuries. Today, dive computers handle this task, but back then, it was a groundbreaking advancement. Starting in 1959, the emergence of dive computers led to major advances in the diving industry. A dive computer calculates depth, time, and decompression information in real time, making it an essential tool that helps divers dive more safely. Today, sport divers use highly advanced equipment to explore the underwater world deeper, longer, and more safely. The SDI Open Water course you're about to take is built on these technological advances and designed with safety in mind. So don't worry, take it slow and learn step by step. The SDI you are learning with now is not just another diving organization. It is a progressive training agency that leads the way worldwide. For example, SDI was the first organization in the world to make the dive computer a mandatory training tool. To understand how important this is, there was a time when divers had to manually calculate from tables, but now dive computers do it automatically, making diving much safer and more convenient. SDI actively brings the latest technology and equipment into its training programs. In other words, you are learning with one of the most modern and advanced training agencies in the world. You can feel confident and take pride in that. Once you complete all your training, including open water dives, you will receive your SDI certification card, commonly called a C card. This is not just a simple piece of paper. It's like a driver's license for diving. When you go diving, whether in your own country or abroad, most dive centers will require you to show this C card in order to rent equipment or join guided dives. You'll also need it to take the next level of training, for example, courses like Advanced or Nitrox. Remember, the course you are taking today is both the first step in your diving journey and the key to earning a qualification that's essential for your future adventures. Even after you've completed your training and received your certification, it's not recommended to go diving alone right away. At first, it's safest to dive with an experienced instructor, a club, or a professional dive guide. In fact, many divers develop their skills and discover the joy of diving through club activities, gaining experience while meeting new people. Especially for your first 10 to 20 dives, it's best to go with more experienced divers. Remember, diving is an activity where steady, real-world experience is key. The SDI instructor with you today is more than just someone who teaches a class. They are professionals with extensive field experience and training. They not only guide you through lessons and open water training, but also offer advice on equipment purchases and future plans, such as where and what kinds of dives might be best for you, and what advanced training options are available. If you have questions or need help, don't hesitate to ask your SDI instructor. They are ready to support you throughout your diving journey. Once you enter the ocean, you'll experience a world completely different from life on land. First, you'll feel your body floating as if you're in zero gravity. Objects will appear larger than they really are, and sounds will seem louder. Even your movements may feel slower or less precise because of the water's resistance. These changes can add to the unique excitement of diving, but they also require some adjustment, because altered senses can cause disorientation or surprise. That's why, in dive training, we learn about these changes in the underwater environment and prepare for them in advance. Did you know that underwater, objects appear larger and closer than they really are? They can look about 33% larger and about 25% closer. This happens because light bends, or refracts, as it passes through different mediums, such as water, your mask, and the air inside it. We wear a mask because our eyes need an airspace to see clearly. However, wearing a mask means things can look bigger or closer than they actually are, and it can even affect your sense of direction. In short, remember that your vision underwater is not perfectly accurate. Sunlight is made up of many different wavelengths of color: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. Of these, red light has the weakest penetration in water, so it disappears first as you descend, while blue light travels the farthest. That's why the deeper you go, the more everything around you takes on a bluish tone. This is also the reason why photos taken underwater can look different in color than expected. Sound travels much faster underwater, about 4 times faster than in air. Because of this, it's difficult to tell where a sound is coming from below the surface. For example, if someone calls out to you, the sound can seem to come from all directions at once, making it hard to pinpoint the source. That's why, underwater, you should rely less on sound and more on making eye contact, using hand signals, or flashing your dive light to communicate. Most importantly, get into the habit of visually checking your buddy often so you don't become separated. Next, let's talk about body temperature. In water, heat is lost about 25 times faster than in air. That's why wearing a wetsuit or dry suit is essential when diving. Whether you use a dry suit or a wetsuit, spending a long time underwater will lower your body temperature, so staying warm is very important. If you notice abnormal shivering, stop the dive immediately, get out of the water, dry off, and keep yourself warm. When your body temperature drops, your judgment and reaction time also decline, so it's something you must take seriously. Now, let's talk about thermoclines. A thermocline is a layer in the water where the temperature changes suddenly. This occurs because of differences in water density and temperature. The surface layer is warm, but below it, the water can become much colder very quickly. While diving, you might suddenly feel a chill. That's the thermocline. Passing through this layer can sometimes reduce visibility and cause your body temperature to drop more quickly, so it's important to be prepared. Did you know that diving can be enjoyed in far more types of water than you might expect? With 75% of the Earth's surface covered by water, scuba divers can explore not only the ocean, but also ponds, lakes, springs, and rivers. That's why, before entering the water, we must always check basic oceanographic information, such as tides, currents, and weather conditions. This isn't just general knowledge, it's a key requirement for safety. Because diving takes place in nature, your ability to observe, analyze, and anticipate environmental conditions is absolutely essential. Some countries have clearly defined 4 seasons. Depending on the season, air temperature, water temperature, currents, and weather conditions can change drastically. For example, in summer, you can expect warmer waters and good visibility, but during monsoon or typhoon seasons, visibility worsens and the sea can become rough. In tropical regions, the year is divided into wet and dry seasons, so it's important to choose the right time depending on the area. Ultimately, understanding seasons and climate is a key factor in deciding when and where to dive. The ideal water temperature for diving is usually between 20 degrees Celsius and 30 degrees Celsius, which is similar to the surface water temperature during summer. However, as you descend, you may encounter a sudden drop in temperature known as the thermocline. This means that even if the surface feels warm, you can still be surprised by how cold it gets underwater. For this reason, it's a good habit to always wear a wetsuit, even a thin one. Underestimating the water temperature can lead to colds or even hypothermia. One of the conditions you'll notice most while diving is visibility. The biggest factor affecting visibility is the composition of the seabed, or the underwater terrain. In areas with a muddy bottom, currents and suspended particles can make visibility poor, while rocky or sandy areas generally offer much clearer water. Other factors, such as rainfall, plankton blooms, and current strength, can also have a significant impact on visibility. In areas with poor visibility, using a compass is essential. When you can't see far, you need to navigate precisely in the planned direction. If you become separated from your buddy underwater, stay calm, ascend slowly to the surface, reunite, and then continue the dive together. To prepare for situations like this, it's best to agree during the pre-dive briefing on exactly what to do if you get separated. Good compass use and strong teamwork are key to avoiding getting lost underwater. On sandy or silty bottoms, even a light kick or brush from your fins can stir up clouds of sediment, and what happens then? Your visibility drops instantly, and you can't see a thing. When you can't see ahead, it's easy to panic, and the risk of accidents increases. In tropical waters, the situation is a little different. The bottom is often covered with living organisms, such as corals and sponges. That means the floor you're over isn't just ground, it's alive. Kicking it with your fins or making contact doesn't just reduce visibility, it can injure or kill these organisms. The key point? Maintain good control over your buoyancy so you avoid touching the bottom. This is a fundamental habit of a safe and responsible diver. Avoid finning near the bottom or kneeling, and always practice keeping neutral buoyancy. Now, let's talk about tides, high tide and low tide. In most places, the sea rises and falls twice a day, following a general cycle of 2 high tides and 2 low tides every 24 hours, though this can vary slightly depending on the location. The rising water is called high tide, and the falling water is called low tide. When diving near the shore, understanding this movement is essential for entering and exiting the water safely. Low tide, in particular, can create stronger currents as the water flows out, so timing is very important. The difference in sea level between high and low tide, called the tidal range, is not always the same. When the tidal range is large, it's known as a spring tide. When it's small, it's called a neap tide. During spring tides, currents are stronger, and water depth along the shore can change significantly. That's why, when planning a dive schedule or deciding entry and exit points, it's important to check the moon phase and the tide tables. Spring tides require extra caution, while neap tides bring smaller changes in sea level and are generally easier for beginner divers. When do spring tides occur? They happen when the sun, Earth, and Moon align in a straight line. On the lunar calendar, this corresponds to the full moon and the new moon. At these times, the gravitational pull of the sun and moon combine, causing the greatest movement of seawater. This creates the largest tidal range, stronger currents, and a period when dive planning must be done with extra care. If your dive day falls near a full or new moon, make sure to check the current patterns and tide schedule. Neap tides occur when the moon is positioned at a right angle to the sun and Earth. On the lunar calendar, this happens between the new moon and full moon, around the first and last quarter phases. At these times, the gravitational forces of the sun and moon partially cancel each other out, resulting in a smaller tidal range and less water movement. This makes it a favorable period for beginner divers or training dives. By understanding and planning around these natural cycles, you can enjoy diving more safely and comfortably. You've probably heard the term tidal current before. Unlike waves, which simply move water back and forth, currents are created when the sea level changes with the tides, high tide and low tide, causing water to flow. As you can see in the illustration, during low tide, the water flows out toward the sea, and during high tide, it flows in toward the land. This rise and fall of the sea level creates water movement, and most of the horizontal flow you feel while diving is caused by these tidal currents. That's why understanding the direction and strength of the current is so important for safe diving. Now, let's talk about ocean currents. Currents are movements of seawater, but unlike tidal currents, they aren't caused only by tides. They can also be driven by wind, differences in water temperature, salinity, and other factors. Currents can be stronger than you might expect. Even if you're a strong swimmer, a powerful current can stop you from making any forward progress. If you encounter a current that's beyond your physical ability or skill level, it can become dangerous. In such cases, don't overexert yourself, stay calm, and respond carefully. Have you heard of drift diving? As the name suggests, it's a style of diving where you ride along with the current. It usually begins in an area with a steady current, and you simply let the water carry you while you enjoy the scenery along the way. At a planned spot, a boat picks you up. Because it requires less physical effort, using the current properly can make for a very relaxing and enjoyable dive. However, if you misread the current and drift the wrong way, it can be dangerous, so always follow your guide's instructions. A longshore current is a current that flows parallel to the shoreline. When wind or waves push water toward the shore, some of that energy also moves sideways, causing water to flow along the beach. When shore diving, it's important to be aware of these currents. Plan your entry and exit points in advance, and take care not to drift off course unexpectedly. If a strong longshore current develops near your exit point, it can make getting out where you planned much more difficult. Now, let's talk about rip currents, one of the most dangerous types of currents. A rip current is a narrow, fast-moving stream of water that flows from the shore out toward the sea. It forms when waves push water onto the beach, and that water rushes back out through a narrow channel. If you don't understand how it works and try to swim directly against it, you can quickly be pulled far out to sea. If this happens, don't panic. Swim parallel to the shoreline, away from the current's path, and only head back to shore once you've escaped the flow. Have you ever been at the beach and suddenly felt a strong pull out to sea, making it hard to swim? That's a rip current. In this situation, many people instinctively try to swim straight back to shore, but that can be very dangerous. The correct approach is to swim parallel to the shoreline until you're completely out of the current. Once the flow weakens, you can then head back toward the beach using less energy and making a much safer escape. Waves are not just moving seawater, they are energy created by the wind. So what determines how big a wave will be? First, the strength of the wind. The stronger it blows, the bigger the waves. Second, how long the wind has been blowing. Third, how wide an area of open water the wind has been affecting. Fourth, how far the wind has pushed the waves toward shore. Understanding these factors can help you predict wave size, which is useful when checking conditions before a dive. What happens when large waves from the open sea approach a shallow shoreline? That's right, the waves grow taller and eventually break. This is called surf or breaking waves. The white foamy waves you see crashing on the beach are the result of this shallow water phenomenon. Breaking waves can reduce visibility and may also create currents or longshore flows, so they require caution. A surge is similar to a wave, but slightly different. It refers to the back and forth motion of water. The shallower the water, the stronger the surge, and it can cause your body to sway side to side while underwater. The main concern is that in shallow areas with coral, rocks, or underwater structures, being pushed around by the surge can lead to injury. When diving in such areas, always stay aware of your surroundings and avoid unnecessary contact with anything around you. In the summer, wearing heavy gear and a wetsuit while staying under the sun for a long time can put you at risk of heat exhaustion or heat stroke. Symptoms may include nausea, headache, or even fainting. Prolonged sun exposure can also cause skin burns. To prevent this, protect yourself with lightweight, breathable long clothing, a hat, and sunscreen. Sun protection is especially important during training sessions and while resting at the surface between dives. While diving, you'll encounter many different kinds of marine life. It's important to understand that most dangerous behavior from these creatures is simply a defensive reaction. If you suddenly reach out or get too close, they may respond out of surprise. So there are two key points to remember. First, avoid reaching for or touching marine life. Doing so can injure you or cause stress to the animal. Second, adopt an attitude of protecting marine life. As divers, it's essential to develop habits that do not harm the creatures or their environment. Now, let's briefly look at injuries that can be caused by marine life while diving. Most are mild and temporary, but some species have venom that can cause pain or even paralysis. For example, jellyfish tentacles can deliver a stinging pain to the skin. Venomous fish, such as stonefish and scorpionfish, can cause intense pain or even shock when touched. Sea urchin spines can puncture the skin and lead to infection. To avoid these risks, learn about the hazardous marine life in the area before diving and have appropriate first aid supplies ready. Above all, the best prevention is simply not touching marine life. Let's review what we've learned with a few practice questions. 1. What does scuba mean? The correct answer is A, the name of the self-contained underwater breathing apparatus. SCUBA stands for Self-Contained Underwater Breathing Apparatus, which literally means underwater breathing equipment with its own air supply. So rather than referring to all diving activities in general, it specifically describes the equipment itself. 2. Which of the following was not an important event in the diving world during the 1950s? The correct answer is D, the start of commercial diving. The 1950s was a time when recreational diving, diving for sport or leisure, was growing rapidly. The dive table was also introduced during this period. However, commercial diving had existed long before then, such as work using diving bells many years earlier. 3. Which of the following is not a piece of older equipment replaced by modern dive computers? The correct answer is D, the buoyancy compensator. In the past, divers carried a separate depth gauge, dive table, and pressure gauge, but now a single dive computer can handle all of these functions. However, the buoyancy compensator, BCD, is used to control ascent and descent in the water, and no matter how advanced dive computers become, it cannot be replaced. It remains an entirely separate piece of equipment. 4. Which of the following is not something that sets SDI apart from other training agencies? The correct answer is C, making students endure difficult and demanding training from the very beginning. Unlike some agencies, SDI aims for a training system that is approachable and easy for beginners. By using dive computers, it reduces the need for complex calculations. And with online learning systems, it allows students to study theory more conveniently. So, making training difficult from the start is the exact opposite of SDI's philosophy. 5. How do objects appear differently underwater and why? The correct answer is A. They appear larger due to light refraction. Underwater, light bends as it passes through the boundary between water and air, a phenomenon known as refraction. Because of this, objects appear about 33% larger or 25% closer than they really are. This is something you can immediately notice when you see it for yourself while diving. 6. How much faster does sound travel underwater compared to in air? And what effect does this have on divers? The correct answer is C, about 4 times faster, making it harder to sense direction. Sound travels about 4 times faster in water than in air. The problem is that this speed actually makes it harder to locate the source of a sound because it reaches both ears almost simultaneously. That's why divers often find it difficult to tell who called them or where a sound came from underwater. 7. Which color of light is absorbed first underwater? The correct answer is A, red. When light enters the water, its absorption rate depends on wavelength, and red is the first color to disappear. As you descend, red fades quickly, and even objects like blood vessels can appear gray or black. This is why dive lights are important. They restore the colors lost underwater. 8. When shore diving, the optimal time to enter the water is during blank, when currents are at their weakest. The correct answer is C, slack tide. Slack tide or slack water is the period when the sea level is neither rising nor falling significantly between tides. In other words, the water is calmest and currents are weakest. Entering at this time reduces the chance of being caught in strong flow and allows for a safer dive. That's why it's important to check and plan around slack tide when shore diving. 9. If you are caught in a rip current, in which direction should you swim first to escape before returning to shore? The correct answer is B, perpendicular. A rip current is a narrow, fast-moving stream of water flowing out to sea. The danger is that it pushes you away from shore. In this situation, never try to swim straight back toward the beach against the current. Instead, swim perpendicular to the current, sideways, until you are out of it, and then slowly head back to shore from a safe position. If you try to fight the current directly, you can quickly become exhausted, which increases the risk of an accident. 10. Waves are generally caused by wind. Most waves on the surface are formed when wind pushes against the water. While tides or the shape of the seabed can also create waves, wind-driven waves are by far the most common. Stronger winds create bigger waves, which can make entry and exit more challenging during a dive. 11. Which statement correctly compares the transmission of sound and the loss of body heat on land versus underwater? The correct answer is A. Underwater, sound travels more than 4 times faster than in air, which is why divers can hear sounds but have difficulty telling their direction. Water also conducts heat more efficiently than air, causing body temperature to drop faster, which is why thermal protection such as a dry suit or wetsuit is essential. 12. If a diver experiences a sudden drop in temperature and darker visibility during descent, which area are they likely in? The correct answer is C. Thermocline. A thermocline is a layer where the temperature drops sharply within a short depth range. Passing through it, a diver may suddenly feel cold and visibility may become darker or murkier. This occurs because warm surface water and cold deep water do not mix, forming a distinct boundary between them. 13. What should you do if you encounter an unfamiliar marine creature underwater? The correct answer is C. Observe or avoid it from a safe distance. Since we don't know the behavior or characteristics of unfamiliar species, getting too close or provoking them can be dangerous. Keeping a safe distance and avoiding unnecessary contact protects both your safety and the underwater ecosystem. 14. Which of the following is not appropriate diving behavior? The correct answer is C. Feeding fish. Feeding fish while diving is never recommended. It can alter their natural behavior, disrupt the ecosystem, and make them dependent on humans for food. 15. Which statement about certification cards is incorrect? The correct answer is A. They are issued by a government agency. A diving certification card is issued by private training agencies, such as SDI or TDI, not by national or public institutions. While these certifications are recognized throughout the diving industry, they are not government-issued documents. Now, let's briefly review what we learned today. Soon, you'll be entering the underwater world, a completely new environment where your sight, hearing, and even your sense of touch will feel different. Underwater, light and sound behave differently, vision can be distorted, and you may encounter unfamiliar marine life. Through this lesson, you've gained a solid understanding of how sight and sound change underwater, as well as the physical conditions and potential hazards you may face. Do you have any questions about what we covered today? If there's anything you didn't fully understand or would like to know more about, feel free to ask anytime.